Mosaic, a daily news program from Worldlink TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Welcome to the news of the hour from Abu Dhabi television. Powell says that there are still disagreements between Washington and Moscow regarding lifting the sanctions off Iraq. 30 people were killed and 150 others were wounded during a suicide attack in Chechnya. The head of the pro-Russian administration in Chechnya, Ahmed Kadyrov, may have been the target of the attack, but he survived. 15 people were involved in the attack in Riyadh, which killed 34 people. The Saudis promised to capture the planners of the attack, while the United States criticized the Saudis, saying that they did not quickly respond to their latest demands, asking them to increase their security. A Belgian lawyer filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Commander-in-Chief in Iraq, Tommy Franks, accusing him of committing war crimes. Meanwhile, the U.S. warns of the effect this lawsuit will have on their ties with Belgium. A Palestinian boy died in Jenin after being shot in the head by Israeli soldiers while they were searching for activists. Furthermore, a Palestinian activist was killed and 10 others were wounded in Nablus in the West Bank. 3 more people from the Palestinian security forces were also killed, and others were injured in southern Gaza, while double incursions occur in the Strip. Iran's president reiterates that Hezbollah is a Lebanese organization and is independent from Iran and Syria, adding that the resistance in Lebanon is a natural right as long as Israel continues to occupy Lebanese land. Now to our correspondent in Beirut, Rafiq Nasrallah.
Khatami links stability in Iraq to peace in the region, sending messages to several places, while asking the American administration to change its foreign policy in the Middle East.
This is the end of the news in brief. Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Saud Al Faisal promised to capture those responsible for the Riyadh bombings, adding that Al-Qaeda, which is suspected of involvement in this attack, will regret their actions. Al Faisal also said that 15 people carried out the attack. Meanwhile, the U.S. ambassador to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia criticized Saudi Arabia for not quickly responding to the latest U.S. demands, asking them to increase security at the residential complex. The Saudi Ministry of Internal Affairs released a statement saying that the number of people killed in the Riyadh bombing increased to 34. This is a strong message to Riyadh and Washington. All evidence points in the direction of Al-Qaeda. Estimates varied on the number of people killed. People were injured and destruction is everywhere, leading the United States, which was the main target of the attack, to decrease the number of their diplomats in its embassy and consulate in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, while advising its citizens to take the most precautionary measures and to leave the country. The strong American language used to condemn the attack and accuse Al-Qaeda was voiced by the U.S. Vice President, reiterating that there will be no agreement, negotiations, or policy of containment to deal with this threat.
This is a conflict we've got to deal with on a worldwide.
This is a conflict we've got to deal with on an international level. This must encourage other governments to cooperate with the United States in intelligence matters and in implementing the law by cracking down on the financial networks and organizations that support groups like Al-Qaeda. The only way to confront this threat is to destroy it completely.
U.S. and Saudi officials are pointing their fingers to Al-Qaeda. However, both of them are not confirming this accusation.
I can't say for certain it was Al-Qaeda yet.
I can't say for sure that it was Al-Qaeda yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was.
While Bush was threatening the operation planners, saying that they will be captured and taught a lesson in American justice, Saudi Arabia reiterated that it will hit with an iron fist terrorist activity that threatens the kingdom's security.
If those criminal killers think that their bloody crimes will threaten our nation and unity, then they are dreaming.
Agents from the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, went to Saudi Arabia to investigate the bombings. Meanwhile, Washington plans to send more agents to Saudi Arabia to strengthen the security measures there. However, analysts believe that Washington plans to directly be involved in combating terrorism on the ground, relying on past successes in other Arab countries.
In the year 2000, Iraq was one of the very few countries in the region that was able to get rid of polio. However, today the disease may come back after the looting that took place in the Health Vaccination Center in Baghdad, where polio vaccinations are kept. Looters broke the vaccination tubes, spreading the highly contagious measles disease on the streets of Baghdad.
In the year 2000, Iraq got rid of polio, and vaccination programs continued to prevent any possible outbreaks in the future. However, after the invasion of Baghdad and the looting that happened in the Health Vaccination Center, where polio vaccinations are kept, the threat of disease returned. We visited what is considered the best laboratory in the region and discovered that it was looted by people that did not know the risks of what they were doing. Virus incubation tubes were thrown on the road and the entrances of the laboratory. The remains of the measles tubes were collected in this bag, perhaps as souvenir for the laboratory that won an international award, recognizing it as one of the best international laboratories. Equipment that was used to solidify the measles was stolen. Others were thrown out for faster mobility. One of the thieves wrote this word:
It is possible that some of these tubes were thrown in the sewage system or somewhere else in the neighborhood, which may cause another catastrophe.
All the measles tubes were collected from the floor and burned in this manner. However, doctors are still worried that the disease may spread to other neighborhoods because the thieves may have stepped on the contagious viruses and spread it around. Thus, the first ones that may contract the disease may be the children of the looters. This laboratory, which is one of the 40 international recognized laboratories, has obtained direct support from the International Health Organization within the framework of an international project to get rid of polio. The International Health Organization vowed to rebuild the laboratory and to resupply it with new equipment. Nonetheless, the workers of the laboratory say that they are suspicious about receiving help from the international organization, but they are waiting anyway.
We are ready. We already made our evaluation and sent lists of what we need. Hopefully, within the next few weeks, we will receive shipments.
While most people hope to see this institution return to the way it was before the war, they fear the return of this contagious disease, which may add another problem to the list of the Iraqi problems.
Minister Ahmed Meher on Wednesday condemned these suicide bombings against foreign housing compounds in Riyadh, saying such attacks were destabilizing for the Arab world. Meher said Egypt opposes these attempts directed against Arab countries and against serious efforts deployed to guarantee the stability of the Middle East. Meher added that such attacks are totally unacceptable as they aim to upset the situation and harm the security of Arab countries. Meher also revealed that the bombings were the focus of a telephone conversation between President Hosni Mubarak and Crown Prince Abdullah bin Abdulaziz of Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Arab League chief Amr Moussa condemned Monday night's suicide attacks in Riyadh, which killed 34 people, including 7 Americans and 9 bombers. Moussa, who was visiting the Arab state of Bahrain, stressed that the Arab League strongly opposes all forms of terrorism. The Security Council met on Wednesday for what diplomats called a question and answer session on a US-sponsored draft resolution to lift economic sanctions against Iraq. The German ambassador to the United Nations said that legal experts had asked more than 40 questions since the draft was submitted on Friday. The UN Legal Council, as well as the director to the UN's Oil for Food program in Iraq, took part in the consultations. The draft resolution would immediately lift the crippling sanctions that the Council slapped on Iraq after it invaded Kuwait in August 1990. It proposes a 4-month wind-down of the Oil for Food program set up in December 1996 to cushion Iraqi citizens from these sanctions. In its place, the draft suggests setting up an Iraqi assistance fund financed entirely by revenues from the country's oil sales. The text says the money would be spent on reconstruction at the direction of the US and British forces currently occupying Iraq. Meanwhile, the new U.S. Administrator of Post-War Iraq, Paul Bremer, said on Wednesday he hoped badly needed UN food aid operations would start next week, but was bluntly told security concerns needed to be addressed first. In his first meeting with UN officials since taking the reins of the U.S. administration of Iraq on Monday, Bremer was warned, however, that widespread crime was holding up food distribution. The top UN humanitarian official in Baghdad, Ramiro de Silva, said the two men had a very open exchange of views during 1 hour of talks. Bremer said after the meeting that the US was particularly interested in discussing the possibility of the World Food Programme taking the money in the Oil for Food program and spending it to purchase the current crop of wheat and barley. He said De Silva has agreed that they should plan on the World Food Programme to spend that money starting as early as next week. De Silva, however, said that security remained the top priority, as other UN officials said it was not yet possible for UN agencies to begin large-scale operations. Still in the region, at least 14 people were reported killed on Wednesday when a female suicide bomber blew herself up at a crowded religious event in Russia's separatist Republic of Chechnya. Chechen Emergencies Ministry said that 14 people were killed in the second major rebel attack within 48 hours, which took place in the eastern village of Ilshkan Yurt. He said another 150 people were wounded in the blast, of which 45 were rushed to hospitals in a critical condition. The reported toll fluctuated in the immediate aftermath of the blast, different officials giving different figures reaching up to 30. The attack occurred during a religious procession attended by 15,000 people on the outskirts of the village, 45 kilometers east of the capital Grozny. Law enforcement officials said the attack could have been targeting Chechnya's pro-Moscow chief administrator, who was present but escaped unhurt, while as 4 of his bodyguards were killed.
Khatami peaked his visit to Lebanon in a massive rally held in the sportive city in Beirut. Khatami's address to the Lebanese people tackled the issues of the moment: Lebanon and its resistance, occupied Palestine and its intifada, Iraq and its future.
It was another glowing welcome for Iranian President Sayyid Mohammad Khatami on the second day of his historic visit to Lebanon. Tens of thousands of Lebanese, estimated by news agencies by 50,000, gathered in the sportive city in Beirut in honor of the most welcome guest. Sayyid Khatami ushered into the stadium in a jeep to greet the massive crowds who were hailing the Islamic Republic and Lebanon during the president's tour all around the stadium. Lebanese, Iranian and Palestinian flags also fluttered as part of the welcome. Sayyid Khatami then headed towards the main platform, where he was welcomed by Hezbollah Secretary General Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and representatives of Lebanese President, Premier and Speaker. Several other parties were also present at the gathering. In the speech he gave in Arabic, Sayyid Khatami hailed the resistance in the region at a time Washington is pressuring Lebanon and Syria to crack down on resistance groups. Sayyid Khatami also said Tehran does not want to escalate tension in the region, calling on the US not to start new regional crises.
لبنان أرض مرفوعة الرأس بمقاومتها في عالمنا المعاصر. كما أن رمز بقاء هذا البلد ووحدته يكمن في هذه المقاومة، فإن لبنان كله وقف بوجه الأساليب التي استخدمتها إسرائيل المعتدية كلها، وإن المقاومة المشروعة التي قام بها جميع الفئات والطوائف جعلت الانتصار انتصارا لجميع أبناء الشعب. ندرك بأن الضغوط الأمريكية قد اشتدت على كل من سوريا ولبنان، إلا أننا نأمل بأن تترك الإدارة الأمريكية العراق الجريء بأسرع ما يمكن ليدار بفعل التدبير العراقي، ونحذر الإدارة الأمريكية أن تكون بصدد خلق أزمات أخرى في المنطقة والعالم بعد الحالة العراقية. وإن القضية الفلسطينية قد أثبتت بأنها لم تكن معقودة بأي قضية أخرى في المنطقة. إن المقاومة باقية طالما هناك الدور والحرمان. وإن هذه المقاومة ليس مصدرها في الخارج، وعلى الآخرين أيضا أن يحاولوا فهم واستيعاب هذه الحقيقة، وأن لا يحاولوا التضليل.
In the ancient Iraq of Babylon, desperate relatives and friends were digging to find remains of their loved ones Wednesday at what U.S. soldiers said was the largest mass grave of Saddam Hussein's victims so far discovered in Iraq. The Iraqi National Congress said Tuesday that as many as 15,000 people may have been buried at the site.
A month after the Iraqi regime fell, its legacy of cruelty and grief is slowly being uncovered. Around the country, a steady stream of mass graves is coming to light in many parts of Iraq, mainly in the south, where most of the country's Shiite majority lives. Thousands more decaying bodies have been unearthed in southern Iraq. Iraqis have been coming to the mass grave in Mahawal Babylon for a week by now, looking for their lost relatives. Volunteers at the site said on Tuesday they had dug out 2,800 bodies from the ground near a brick factory. They suspect some 11,000 bodies to be lying underground and believe they were executed in 1991 during the Shiite uprising. Some skulls still had cloth wrapped around their eye sockets, and several pieces of clothing had small, clean, round holes, which locals said were caused by the bullets that killed them. As soon as the relatives of the dead arrive, men and women looking for their loved ones, sons and daughters, parents and uncles who disappeared without trace more than 10 years ago pore over the documents found inside the rotting pockets of the dead. Volunteers who first came to the site were staggered by the number of bodies they found once they started digging.
When we started off our action, we suspect the presence a small number, about hundreds, and we suspect the presence of our relatives from the first day. But when we continue on digging and digging and digging, there are 15 graves in each of that. There are about 1 to 200. We have till now 3,000 of the cadavers.
Scores of mass graves have been uncovered across Iraq over the last month, yet no investigations have been carried out. One man at the site said he wanted justice, but this will not happen if the circumstances of the death are not investigated. Hundreds of people believed to be Kurds were also unearthed in the middle of the desert, about 100 kilometers south of the holy city of Najaf. According to eyewitnesses in Ash-Shanafiya, hundreds or even thousands of Kurds have been killed and buried in the middle of the desert around 1987. Amnesty International believes as many as 17,000 people may have disappeared during Saddam's rule. The actual total sum may be much higher, and with relatives desperate for every scrap of information, aid workers fear that valuable evidence could be destroyed by unsupervised excavations.
Now updating the death toll, the Saudi Interior Ministry said at least 34 people were killed in car bombings that devastated 3 expatriate compounds in Riyadh on Tuesday. U.S. President George W. Bush has vowed the United States would hunt down those responsible for the massive bomb attacks blamed on Al-Qaeda.
Anti-American sentiment is running high, particularly in the Middle East and the Gulf region. Messages suspected to be from Al-Qaeda network reveal an intention to launch war against U.S. interests in the Gulf states, the United States, and abroad. According to a senior political editor in a London-based Saudi weekly magazine, Al-Majalla, the magazine received an email from Al-Qaeda naming Saudi Arabia as a target ahead of the bombings in Riyadh. Aysam Abdullah added that the message was written by Muhammad al-Abla, an Al-Qaeda operative known as Abu Bakr, and that the message is regarded credible.
Well, there says that there is a new strategy for Al-Qaeda to attack and threat explosions against the Gulf countries and countries allied to the United States and the United States as itself. And this says that Mr. bin Laden is going to launch a new war, which is, let's say, guerrillas war against the targets, and it will be run for several times and let's say several period of time as well, starting from the Gulf countries.
Monday's attacks on complexes housing foreigners, mainly Americans, in the Saudi capital appeared to show that even the recent U.S. vow to withdraw most of its troops from the kingdom within months would not placate those planning the attacks. In London, the International Institute for Strategic Studies said in its annual report that Al-Qaeda network was now reconstituted and doing business in a different manner. A high-ranking U.S. official said Tuesday that the massive bomb attacks on 3 expatriate housing compounds were executed like true commando operations. According to a senior U.S. military officer at the site, the 3 attacks occurred at particularly the same time and followed the same scenario, with one vehicle attacking the guard post at the compound's entrance to allow the second vehicle access. The bombings left at least 29 people killed, including 9 bombers and 7 Americans, and 194 injured. Washington fears the death toll could rise to as high as 50. In the meantime, U.S. President George W. Bush, ravished by his occupation of Iraq, vowed one more time a relentless campaign to stamp out groups like Al-Qaeda blamed for the bombings, as U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell said the attacks bore all fingerprints of bin Laden's network.
We'll take necessary precautions, but one thing is for certain. The people that killed the Americans and other innocent lives will be tracked down and they will be brought to justice. Doesn't matter how long it takes. The war on terror goes on. And this incident in Saudi Arabia shows the country that we still have got a war to fight, and we will fight it.
The United States on Tuesday ordered non-essential U.S. diplomats and the families of all its embassy and consulate personnel to leave the Saudi kingdom. The State Department issued a statement reminding its citizens of renewed and existing travel warnings to Saudi Arabia. Prior to the U.S. invasion of Iraq, Al-Qaeda threatened to confront any U.S. occupation of a Muslim and Arab country. The bombings may have been a translation of these threats, and this once again shows that Americans' foreign policy of war and occupation will but increase attacks against its interests worldwide.
In today's Israeli breaches, Israeli occupation troops carried out fresh raids into the Gaza Strip today, killing 3 Palestinian policemen near the Jewish settlement of Netzarim, while dozens of Palestinians were wounded and several buildings destroyed in another incursion. The Palestinian citizen Taysir Abu Shahab was also killed in clashes in the West Bank city of Nablus. 3 members of the Palestinian Security Services were killed and 3 others wounded by Israeli fire, Palestinian security sources said. Head of the Gaza Strip National Security Directorate, General Abdelrazak al-Majaida, said that the 3 policemen were shot in cold blood. He also accused the Israeli army of preventing ambulances from reaching the wounded for more than 2 hours and said the 3 men could have been saved but bled to death. The army also raided an area in the southern Gaza Strip town of Khan Yunis, firing a missile from a helicopter which wounded 23 Palestinians, the sources added. Armored vehicles then entered the area near Tafaha checkpoint, which guards the road leading to Al-Mawasi area. 3 more Palestinian citizens were wounded in exchange of fire, and the Israeli army dynamited 3-floor buildings. However, Palestinian security sources said that some of the 22 flats reduced to rubble were inhabited and that the occupants were evacuated by the occupation troops before they were blown up. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, a Palestinian citizen was killed in clashes with Israeli occupation troops in the old city of Nablus, Palestinian medical sources said. Some 20 other Palestinians, most of them young, were wounded during the army operation to nab wanted citizens, the sources said.
Iran and Saudi Arabia are to open talks on the inflow of Saudi workforce and capital into Iranian free trade zones based on agreements reached between Iran and Saudi Arabia in Tehran. On Wednesday, Iranian producers can make their presence felt in Saudi markets if their products measure to international standards. The Saudi side also welcomed making investment in Iranian markets.
And we feel that investment in Iran is very, very safe. And according to our meeting during this week with all officials, we felt that Iranian government is welcoming the investment of Saudi Arabian people. And also we have been informed about the new regulations of the investment that it gives full freedom for the investors to bring in their investment and also to operate here, and at the end, if they want to take their money back, either in the profits or the whole investment, they can do without any complicated formalities.
It's very important really to have a direct communication between Muslim communities wherever they are, not only Iran, but wherever Muslims available, they have free communication with their brotherhood, wherever they are, either in Saudi Arabia or in Malaysia or in Pakistan or in Central Asia. Muslims are one nation. We should break all these barriers among the Muslim countries, among the Muslim communities, and now it's very important. Muslims should think in advance that they should create a common platform among them. They should have a common Muslim common market, for example, to provoke trading and businesses among them.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation,